There is a silent turning point in a man's life, a moment when he no longer seeks validation, no longer explains his moves, no longer waits for the world's permission to grow. Instead, he turns inward, he locks in, he simplifies, and with steady hands and a clear mind, he begins to build himself, quietly. Because he has discovered the truth. When you focus on yourself and stay quiet, your life begins to change. Not instantly, not dramatically, but undeniably. You see, the world teaches noise. It rewards visibility. It praises the man who constantly speaks, constantly posts, constantly reacts. But the world does not build him. It distracts him. That is why most men remain stuck. They are not short on ambition. They are short on direction. Their attention is scattered. Their minds are cluttered. Their energy is divided across conversations, opinions, trends, and comparisons, none of which strengthen them. But the man who learns to withdraw his energy from the world, he becomes steady, private, focused, unmoved by gossip, unaffected by noise, and in that stillness, he begins to transform, not for attention, but for elevation. He begins to study more and scroll less. He trains more and talks less. He builds more and reacts less. And slowly the results begin to speak in his place. Because that's the first change. Your energy begins to return. When you stop explaining yourself, you conserve power. When you stop chasing validation, you regain control. When you stop scattering your focus, you begin to sharpen. And a sharp man doesn't need to announce himself. His presence does it for him. His consistency reveals him. His self-respect introduces him before he speaks. But that presence is not found in noise. It's built in discipline. And discipline cannot survive in an environment of constant distraction. So the man who truly wants to change his life does not seek a spotlight. He seeks alignment. He removes what's unnecessary. He silences what's unproductive. He reorganizes his priorities around himself, his health, his mind, his values, his direction. And by doing so, he steps out of the cycle of waiting and into the process of becoming. This is not selfish, it is essential, because until a man becomes grounded in who he is, he will always be vulnerable to who the world wants him to be. So let this be your pivot point. Turn your focus inward, turn the volume down, walk past the noise, the pressure, the chaos, and get to work on yourself. And do it quietly. Because soon enough, if you stay consistent, if you stay committed, if you stay focused, you won't have to tell anyone your life is changing. They'll see it for themselves. There is a discipline to silence, a form of strength that most will never understand, because in a world that rewards performance, the quiet man looks out of place. He doesn't rush to share his opinions. He doesn't announce his progress. He doesn't need to. He's not focused on appearances. He's focused on substance. And this, my friend, is where the real transformation begins. Because when you stay quiet, the noise of the world fades, and you begin to hear something else, clarity. You start to see what matters. You start to notice what drains you. You begin to identify the habits, people, and patterns that once distracted you, and you let them go. Not with anger, but with purpose. That's the power of focusing on yourself. You take your life out of everyone else's hands and put it back in your own. You stop asking for permission to grow. You stop waiting for others to understand you. You stop trying to be liked and start becoming effective. And once that shift is made, everything starts to move differently. You wake up earlier, not to prove anything, but to reclaim your time. You train harder, not to impress anyone, but to keep promises to yourself. You speak less, because your work has started to say what words never could. This is the edge that silence gives you. It makes you dangerous, not because you're loud, but because you're in control. The man who masters silence no longer reacts. He no longer chases. He no longer pleads. He observes. He prepares. He becomes selective. His standards rise, and as they do, so does the quality of everything around him. His relationships change not because he demanded it, but because he required it through his actions. His income changes not because he wished for more, but because he became worth more through his discipline. His peace changes not because the world calmed down, but because he built an inner world the chaos couldn't touch. And none of this required attention. None of this required performance. It required alignment. Because here's the truth. You do not get what you shout for. You get what you prepare for. And the most powerful preparation happens in silence. While others are talking, you're training. While others are waiting, you're executing. While others are seeking applause, you're becoming worthy of it, without needing it. This is the slow, steady, often unnoticed path, but it is the only path that leads to mastery. And those who walk it do not complain that life is hard. They don't look around and blame the world. They look inward and ask, what must I become to be ready? And then they go to work, quietly, daily, without skipping steps. Because when you focus on yourself, when you stay consistent, and when you stop announcing your every move, the world can't help but notice the results. That's how your life changes, not all at once, but layer by layer. And by the time they ask how you did it, you'll already be 3 steps ahead. If you want to know the real measure of a man, observe how he acts when no one's watching. Does he still rise early? Does he still train hard? Does he still speak with discipline and move with intention? Or does he only perform when there's a crowd? Because the man who requires an audience will always be owned by the world. But the man who builds in silence, who works when it's just him and his standard, that man cannot be moved. This is why focus is so powerful. It removes the need for external motivation. It shifts your attention from what others are doing to what you must do. And in that shift, you begin to reclaim your time, your peace, and your power. You begin to set boundaries, not to keep others out, but to keep yourself on course. You begin to eliminate tasks not because you're lazy, but because you're now ruthless with your attention. You begin to protect your mornings, structure your days, and leave behind the habit of explaining yourself. Because you now realize results are the only explanation you ever need. And results don't come from conversation. They come from repetition. From showing up, from keeping the promises no one else sees, from sharpening yourself when no one is clapping. That's the kind of discipline that changes lives. Let the others chase trends. Let them post every move. Let them burn energy trying to be seen. You build. You focus. You stay quiet. Because what you're building isn't for entertainment. It's for legacy. And a legacy isn't formed in noise, it's formed in depth. The kind of depth that comes from time spent in solitude, in routine, in relentless self-honesty. You're not comparing anymore. You're not performing anymore. You're becoming someone you trust. And that trust creates internal momentum. You no longer ask if you're doing the right thing, you know it. Because your days align with your direction. Your habits reflect your values. Your energy isn't scattered anymore, it's aim. And this is when you become magnetic. Not because you say the right things, but because you live in a way that others respect, even if they don't understand it. You no longer need to be explained. You're felt. Your work is sharp. Your presence is steady. Your silence is louder than their noise. This is not about isolation. It's about integration. You are finally integrating what you believe with how you live. And that integrity begins to attract what you used to chase. People, opportunities, peace, progress. They find you not because you begged for them, but because you made yourself ready to receive them. That is what happens when a man focuses on himself and stays quiet. He builds quietly. He earns deeply. And eventually, his life speaks loudly, all on its own. A powerful life is not built by accident. It is built through structure, through clear intention, through a kind of discipline that does not shout, but works. And that kind of life begins the moment a man says, no more distractions, no more performing. From now on, I build quietly, I focus on myself. That decision changes everything. Because when you shift your focus inward, you begin to see where you were leaking energy. You notice the conversations you no longer need to be in, the habits that no longer serve your growth, the people who no longer reflect your future. And with each layer you strip away, your life becomes lighter, sharper, more yours. You begin to simplify, not because you're minimizing ambition, but because you're eliminating clutter. You don't need 20 goals. You need one mission. You don't need everyone's approval. You need your own self-respect. You don't need more stimulation. You need stillness, the kind that reveals what really matters. And that stillness is found in silence, in time alone, in early mornings, in structured routines, in being unavailable to anything that doesn't align with the man you've chosen to become. That's how your identity strengthens, not in the spotlight, but in the quiet, when you're the only one watching. This is where true growth lives. Not in achievement alone, but in alignment. You no longer chase, you align. You no longer explain, you execute. You no longer waste time wondering when your life will change, because you are now building it, brick by brick. And here's what most people never understand. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. It keeps you from wasting energy. It keeps you focused. It keeps you in a state of observation, learning, and precision. And while others are busy being visible, the man in silence is becoming valuable. Valuable through mastery. Valuable through consistency. Valuable through repetition without recognition. That's what makes you formidable. You are no longer controlled by attention. You are no longer fueled by reaction. You are no longer seduced by urgency. You set the tone. You set the rhythm, and the world begins to respond not to what you say, but to how you carry yourself. Because there's something about a man who is calm, deliberate, and grounded. He doesn't need to say much. His discipline speaks for him, his energy speaks for him, and when he does speak, people listen not because of volume, but because of weight. And where does that weight come from? It comes from the silence, from the work done when no one's clapping, from the self-control developed when no one's watching, from the repetition practiced when no one's asking for it. So if you want your life to rise, don't add more noise, add more focus. Withdraw from the unnecessary, go quiet, refine yourself in the shadows, get your life aligned behind the scenes, and let the work speak. Because the man who focuses on himself and stays quiet doesn't have to chase success. Becomes it. Every man at some point in his life must face a hard truth. No one is coming to save him. No one is going to hand him the discipline, the direction, or the life he wants. It must be earned. And it is earned not through talk, not through performance, but through quiet, caliber responsibility. This is the essence of focusing on yourself. It's not about shutting the world out. It's about tuning yourself in. It's about refusing to wait, refusing to beg, refusing to explain. Instead, you build, you refine, you grow, whether anyone notices or not, because the man who is becoming does not need applause. He needs consistency. He needs solitude. He needs clarity. And all of these come from one source: intention. When your life becomes intentional, everything begins to change. You begin to move slower, not with laziness, but with precision. You begin to speak less, not from insecurity, but from strength. You begin to commit deeper, not to everything, but to the few things that matter most. This is how confidence is built, not from the world approving of you, but from you approving of your own habits, from you knowing that your day, your decisions, your direction are all aligned. And that alignment makes you unstoppable, not because you never fail, but because you no longer quit on yourself. The man who is aligned doesn't need motivation, he doesn't need pressure. He moves because movement is now part of his identity. And identity, not talent, is what sustains success. You will always return to who you believe you are. So if you believe you're focused, disciplined, consistent, and patient, your actions will follow. Even on the hard days, even when the world tries to pull you off track, even when no one's watching. Especially then, Because you've made silence your strength. You've made solitude your strategy. You've made focus your foundation. And now life starts to shift. Not because of magic, but because of alignment. You're no longer resisting the flow of your own potential. You're finally living in step with it, and everything outside begins to adjust. People start to treat you differently, because you treat yourself with higher standards. Opportunities begin to arrive because you're finally ready for them. Obstacles don't stop you because you've trained yourself to move regardless. That is the reward for staying quiet. You no longer beg for change, you become the change. You no longer explain your effort, you embody it. And as your character compounds, so does your life. Not loudly, but powerfully. Because the man who stays focused on himself eventually builds a life that others notice, not because it was broadcasted, but because it was earned. And now we arrive at the final truth, the one that requires no noise, no explanation, and no applause. The man who focuses on himself and stays quiet becomes unstoppable, because he finally understands what most men never will. That change does not come through performance. It comes through alignment. You see, when your thoughts, actions, standards, and intentions are all working in the same direction, life no longer feels chaotic. You no longer chase. You no longer need to be seen. You simply move, because movement has become who you are. And over time, that quiet movement builds something louder than any words ever could. Results that don't beg for attention, they command respect. This is the reward of silence. You build the kind of life that speaks for itself. You walk with the kind of presence that doesn't need explanation. You carry the kind of discipline that doesn't require motivation, because you've become someone few will ever have the patience or the courage to become. But you must continue, not because you're behind, but because you've come too far to stop now. Keep waking up early. Keep honoring your word. Keep setting standards in silence. Keep sharpening your thoughts, your body, your purpose. Let others ask, what's he doing? Let them wonder why you've become so still, so focused, so unavailable to the noise. And then, one day, they will see. They'll see it in how you carry yourself, in what you've built, without ever announcing it. In the life you live, not by accident, but by design. Because when you focus on yourself, when you commit to growth in silence, when you protect your energy and build your mind, you no longer need to force anything. You become the kind of man who attracts everything he used to chase: peace, respect, power, and clarity. Not because you said the right thing, but because you became the right man. So move in silence, build with purpose, and let your future unfold exactly as it should.